Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha in this book series titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. Today we're starting a new book, Volume 5, which is titled The First Stage of Enlightenment, Stream Enterer. This is where there's a collection of teachings that will help you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And what you would need in order to get to that first stage of enlightenment is to first develop your foundational understanding of the teachings that are in Volume 1 and then throughout the other volumes leading up to Volume 5. We're going to be moving right into Volume 5 today, and for those of you guys that have been learning either live or on the replays, then you will have develop your understanding of the foundational teachings through the group learning program, which is Volume 1, and then Volumes 2, 3, and 4, and now moving into Volume 5. We will typically start this class with a brief meditation in order to prepare the mind, but today what I'm going to do instead is provide you an introduction to moving to the stages of enlightenment and what this first stage of enlightenment is all about, so that then when you actually are studying the teachings in this book, you'll have a better framework to understand what it is that you're actually going to be learning. So let me start with that and just helping you to understand a bit about the first stage of enlightenment. This first stage of enlightenment is where the mind is moving into the ability to now move beyond that into the upper stages of enlightenment, stage 2, 3, and 4, where the mind is actually enlightened when you get to the fourth stage. We call this first stage of enlightenment stream enterer, because once you attain the first stage of enlightenment, you've now entered the stream like a log. And this log is going to eventually make its way to the ocean. It's only a matter of time. So the ocean is like enlightenment or nibbana. And now once somebody enters into that first stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer, you're going to get to enlightenment either in this life or some future life, a maximum of 7 rebirths. And once your mind is in that first stage of enlightenment, the mind won't regress backwards from there. It will only make forward progress. But in order to get to that first stage of enlightenment, you would have needed to learn and practice all the foundational teachings, things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts. You would need to understand the 3 poisons or 3 unwholesome roots or 3 fires. You would need to understand the natural law of karma, what is merit. You would need to develop a meditation practice and all types of other aspects of your work in order to learn and reflect, independently verify, and practice those foundational teachings. And as you're doing that and you're getting your arms around those foundational teachings, you're going to start to experience what's referred to as the jhanas. These are mental qualities that you experience prior to the first stage of enlightenment. The first stage of enlightenment is where the mind is now not going to regress. But in those 4 jhanas, the mind can actually regress backwards. If you become complacent for any reason, the mind can actually regress out of those jhanas. And there are certain qualities that the mind's going to experience there. It's almost like the light bulb is flickering a bit, helping you get experiences and glimpses of what enlightenment is like. You're getting maybe a few minutes or a few hours, maybe even a few days of these little glimpses of peacefulness and joy and calmness and steadiness in the mind. This is where you have the indication that now you've put together the foundational teachings in such a way that it's starting to produce these qualities of mind that we refer to as the jhanas. And I teach classes and there's information in the book series and other places what these jhanas are and how to know that your mind is moving into these jhanas. These are mental qualities that you experience not only in meditation but outside of meditation as well. Sometimes people think that you're only experiencing the jhanas when you're in meditation, but indeed what you'll see is that these are mental qualities that you're experiencing at all times during your day. And as you're moving through those jhanas, it's really helpful because it's helping you to understand that you are putting together those foundational teachings, and it's an indication to you that now you should start really honing in on eliminating the first 3 fetters in order to get the mind into the first stage of enlightenment. These fetters that the Buddha taught, there's 10 individual fetters. We also refer to them as taints or pollutions or defilements. What a fetter is it's like a shackle around your ankle with a chain and a ball that keeps a prisoner trapped. And these 10 fetters are keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state and in the cycle of rebirth. So what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're working to eliminate all 10 fetters, because by eliminating all these 10 pollutions of mind, then you can experience the brightness, the radiance of the enlightened mind, where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You experience focus, concentration, clarity of mind, and deep memory. You'll see your personal, professional relationships blossom. You won't even be in a bad mood any longer. You'll always be experiencing a good mood. So everything on the path to enlightenment is guiding you to eliminate these 10 fetters. Whether the Buddha actually mentions that or not, you can see as you learn more and more about his path that even things like the 5 precepts, which are very beginning teachings that someone is learning, as you're learning, reflecting, and practicing those, it's actually helping you to eliminate things like ill will or sensual desire. Even that first precept of not killing and living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. This is helping you to eliminate ill will. Or the precept like not stealing or not having sexual misconduct. This is helping you to eliminate sensual desire. And we could go through each individual one of the teachings of the Buddha and show you how it's helping you to eliminate these 10 fetters. But as you're putting together those foundational teachings and you're moving into the jhanas and you're starting to experience those qualities of mind, you may or may not have really focused on the 10 fetters yet and understanding what they are and how to eliminate them. But if you're starting to experience those jhanas and the qualities of mind there, this is the time to really focus on the 10 fetters and starting to understand them more deeply so that you can then more actively eliminate them. Even though you've already been eliminating them by putting their practice together of the Eightfold Path and the 5 precepts and other things, you've already been working to eliminate them without necessarily realizing it. So now when you're starting to experience the qualities of the jhanas prior to getting into that first stage of enlightenment, this is where you would like to really focus in on the fetters, understanding what they are and how to eliminate them. And this is what's going to help you to move into that first stage of enlightenment. One of the ways you can think about the first stage of enlightenment in this continuous progress to enlightenment itself is if you're familiar with hiking in Mount Everest. If you were going to hike Mount Everest, which is the summit, you would end up hanging out at base camp for a while and kind of getting everything in order that you need to be able to make the summit and actually hike to the top. But before you even get to base camp of Mount Everest, not every average hiker is going to do that. These people have already done a lot of preliminary work over multiple years in order to even get to the point where they get to base camp. They might have gone on various hikes in the various places in the world. They would have researched equipment and what equipment is being used in order to hike. They would have tried different types of boots and clothing and different equipment and so forth. And as they build up their wisdom, they get the confidence to the point where they're interested in getting to that summit of Mount Everest. And now they would put together a plan in order to get to base camp. And at base camp, they have a certain amount of wisdom and knowledge and equipment and all the things that they need in order to get to that summit. And the first stage of enlightenment is that way, that what the Buddha is doing throughout his path is he's ensuring that you have everything that you need in order to get to that summit, but you're still at base camp. That's what the first stage of enlightenment is. So as we study the teachings today, that are the first 10 chapters of this volume 5, this entire book is dedicated to helping you understand the progression to the first stage of enlightenment. You're going to see various things that the Buddha is sharing with you that you're going to need in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And now, getting to the first stage of enlightenment and having attained it, you have everything you need to get the rest of the way to enlightenment itself. In that first stage of enlightenment, you will have significantly reduced your discontentedness. There's still discontentedness in the mind, but there would have been significant improvement to the condition of the mind. And you would know that because you would observe that things where you once got really angry or stronger feelings of other types of discontentedness, now those same things are happening and you're either not getting angry at all or you're just getting very little discontentedness as a part of that experience, where before you would get much more angry in those situations. So getting to this first stage of enlightenment is really important because it prepares you for the rest of the journey to enlightenment. And once you get there, your mind can't regress backwards. And having gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, if you die in that stage, then you're going to come back into the human realm with more opportunity to make your way further on the path to enlightenment. There's a maximum of 7 rebirths before you will ultimately get to enlightenment. It could be 2, it could be 3, you don't necessarily know, but there's a maximum of 7 once somebody gets to the first stage of enlightenment. You may have been at the first stage of enlightenment in prior lives before this, or you may not have. But getting to that first stage of enlightenment, you will now experience rebirth in the human realm. Because as beings are born into the human realm, they're typically coming out of the animal realm. So the unenlightened mind of a human being functions very much like an animal. This is why we tend to be bitter and harsh and aggressive and hostile in our human existence, because we're coming out of that animal realm. We sometimes kill or steal or have sexual misconduct because of the conditioning of the mind from the animal realm. But now, if you've been on the path and you're starting to train your mind and cultivate your consciousness, and you're moving closer and closer to this first stage of enlightenment, you're essentially becoming a better and better human being because you're now functioning with more wisdom and you've trained your mind, you've developed your mind. So getting to that first stage of enlightenment, you've become a better human being at that point. You now have escaped rebirth into the lower realms. So a being who's attained the first stage of enlightenment, it's impossible for them to actually be reborn into the realm of hell, the animal realm, or afflicted spirits. They're going to, if they die in that stage, be reborn back into the human realm, or they can actually continue from that point forward. So if somebody's been in the first stage of enlightenment in previous births, they would come back into the world and make their way to that first stage of enlightenment and perhaps beyond. But there are some people that have never learned these teachings ever before, and they can come into the world, they can learn these teachings, get to that first stage of enlightenment and beyond. You're not required to be reborn 7 times as a stream enter in order to get to enlightenment. But if somebody should die in that first stage of enlightenment, they will be reborn a maximum of 7 times back into the human realm. And what we're going to be doing in this book is putting together all the teachings from the words of the Buddha that are going to help you see how to get to that first stage of enlightenment. But remember, this is all based on a student having already put together a strong foundation with the group learning program and other courses and retreats that I teach using volume 1 and then volume 2, 3, and 4. So these teachings in volume 5 are a continuation of helping you evolve from those teachings that I've shared in other books up to this now volume 5. And for those of you guys that might be interested, there's a retreat here in Chiang Mai that I'm going to be teaching starting on August 20th that this entire retreat is geared towards providing you all the teachings that you need in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So over the course of about 5 or 6 days, I'm going to be teaching in the morning and in the evenings, and we're doing activities throughout the day that are going to help a student to put together all the teachings they need to get to this very important first stage of enlightenment, where your mind won't regress, where you've escaped the lower realms, where you've significantly reduced your discontentedness, and you have all the teachings you need to make your way beyond that to the actual enlightened mental state. So this is the basis of this book, and these teachings are spread out throughout the book over a course of about 53 chapters, and I'll be studying these in the same way that we've done the other books, which is 10 chapters a week. And I'll invite students from Zoom to be able to read the chapters so that as a student reads the chapters, then I will come in with some teachings and open up to any questions that you guys might have related to the teachings themselves before we move on to the next chapter. So today we didn't do meditation because I needed to introduce this to you and help you get a frame of reference of what these teachings are about in this book. And now in the future classes, we'll go forward and study 10 chapters a week. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly, and invite you to study along with us in this study group where you can learn the words of the Buddha and just understand that these teachings are based on a student having already learned other teachings from the other book series or the other classes and courses and retreats that I share. So here we have chapter 1, and if there's anyone in Zoom that would like to read this, you're welcome to read it. And then we'll go from there where I'll share some teachings and open up to any questions that you guys might have. If you have questions, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I will see your questions. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. All right, it looks like there's no one who's reading the chapter here. If you guys in Zoom would like to read at any point in today's class, you can just electronically raise your hand and let me know. I'll go ahead and read this. Oh, there we go. Christine would like to read. Go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, I can read. The Mirror of the Stream Enterer. Ananda, I will teach you a teaching exposition called the Mirror of the Teachings, equipped with a noble discipline. If he aspires, could by himself declare of himself. I am one finished with hell, finished with the animal realm, finished with the realm of afflicted spirits, finished with the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the netherworld. I am a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as my destination. And what, Ananda, is the teachings exposition, the mirror of the teachings, equipped with which a noble discipline, if he aspires, could by himself declare thus of himself. Here, Ananda, a noble discipline possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha. Thus, the perfectly enlightened one is an arahat, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate knower of the worlds, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the fortunate one. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teachings thus. The teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. He possesses confirmed confidence in the community thus. The community of the perfect enlightened one's disciplines is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. This community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. He possesses the virtues dear to the noble ones, unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. Thus, Ananda is those teachings exposition, the mirror of the teachings, equipped with a noble discipline, if he aspires, would by himself declare of himself.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So let me explain what the Buddha is sharing here, because he's sharing 4 aspects of your practice that you would have developed in order to get to stream enter, which is that first stage of enlightenment. But these aren't the only 4 aspects of your practice that you would have developed. These are just 4 aspects that he's describing in this particular discourse. But as you see in this book, there's going to be other things that he shares that one would need to develop beyond just these 4 things. Here he's saying that a noble disciple, if they're equipped with these particular things, that he could declare of himself what he's sharing here is that you can consider yourself a stream enterer if you've accomplished these four things and the other things that he's going to share in this particular book as well, where there's lots of different teachings. He is not suggesting that you should go out into the world and declare to other people, hey, by the way, I'm a stream enterer. Look at me. Look how great I am. Because that would be conceit. That would be arrogance and boastfulness. That's part of what you're trying to eliminate in order to get to enlightenment itself. So he wouldn't suggest that a student of his go out and declare to other people. He's saying declare of himself, meaning that you'll know for yourself that you have gotten to this particular stage of enlightenment as you cultivate the mind in this way with these four things, along with the other things that he's going to share in this book. And as I mentioned in the intro, that once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're no longer going to be born into the lower realms of hell, animal, or afflicted spirits. It's important to understand that the Buddha never used rebirth in any of the realms as a way to guilt, shame, or fear people into learning and practicing his teachings. As part of the path to enlightenment, he's helping his students eliminate guilt, shame, and fear. So he wouldn't use guilt, shame, and fear in order to motivate people to learn teachings that eliminate guilt, shame, and fear. He's just stating true reality of what truly is happening, that if you get to this first stage of enlightenment, you're not going to be reborn into the lower realms. And this is an important accomplishment on your journey to enlightenment. But you would need to know how to get to this first stage of enlightenment. And this particular teaching is setting you up with four things that you're going to need in addition to others. The four things that the Buddha is talking about here that a noble disciple is going to need, and by the way, a noble disciple is someone who's deeply studying his teachings. During his lifetime, there was a caste system that was in place, and it was the affluent people who were born into very affluent and rich families that were considered nobility. And it was thought that if you're born into a family that had lesser means and didn't have as many resources, that you were kind of destined for this life of servitude and difficulties. Whereas if you were born into an affluent family, then you were destined to wonderful, great things in your life. And what the Buddha taught is that everybody's equal, and that it's not about what family you're born into, it's about your wisdom and your conduct. So even if an individual joined him as a student who was from a family with less resources, he would refer to his students as noble disciples, people who are deeply practicing the teachings. In fact, if you see the ordained practitioners today, that they expose their right shoulder as part of wearing their robes, during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was only nobility that would expose their right shoulder. And when they went out into the world, people would know that they're nobility because they had their right shoulder exposed. So the Buddha would have everybody, no matter where they were born and what family they were born into, if they became a student of him, then they would start wearing these robes and expose their right shoulder, because now they're learning wisdom and they're practicing the moral conduct as a way to now function in a more noble way. So you'll see him use this term noble disciple as a way to refer to students who are dedicated and diligent to learning and practicing his teachings. There's four things that he says that you need as part of your journey to this first stage of enlightenment. You need confidence in the Buddha, confidence in his teachings, confidence in the community, and virtues that are dear to the noble ones. Let me explain a bit about what these are. We refer to the first three as the triple gem or the triple jewel, that in order to get to enlightenment, you would need to have these three things. You would need to have confirmed confidence in the Buddha, that he indeed is perfectly enlightened, that he was an arahant. You would need to have access to his teachings, and you would need to be part of a community. And these things occur as you're progressing towards enlightenment. When you first start on this path, you may not have confidence in the Buddha. You may just be kind of curious of what his teachings are all about as you start learning them. But as you start investigating his teachings and examining them, and you notice that as you're implementing them, you can independently verify his teachings, that it's helping to improve the condition of your mind, the condition of your life. You're seeing that your relationships are more at ease. You're starting to experience more peace and joy in certain areas of your life. You ultimately get to a point by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment where you have no doubt that the Buddha's teachings are indeed leading to an improved condition of your mind, and that he would have had to have been a Buddha because 2,500 years ago he shared these teachings, and here you are 2,500 years later learning, reflecting, and practicing his teachings and getting benefit. Because what a Buddha is that they have independently discovered the teachings that lead to enlightenment. Then they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing those teachings that they discovered on their independent journey. And then countless people get to enlightenment during their lifetime. And then the third thing is that they preserve their teachings in such a way that after their death, countless more people can get to enlightenment after their death. So if you're here now 2,500 years later learning and practicing his teachings, and you're experiencing benefit with that, you'll get to a point where you know with 100% certainty that this individual lived and that he was a Buddha, because he meets all three criteria of what a Buddha is. And you gain that through investigating his teachings. You don't have blind belief or just, follow based on faith. Instead, you investigate and examine his teachings. You reflect on them to independently verify them. And then you practice them. And this is what transforms your mind. And as you see those improvements, you will have confidence in the Buddha. You will have confidence in his teachings because you would have had to have access to his teachings. And you would have confidence in the community that you're part of, because being part of a community, you'll be able to see examples of people who are learning and practicing these teachings, and almost like role models, that as you're coming onto the path and you're entering into a community, you can see people practicing things like right intention and right speech and right action and other things like this. If you didn't have these three things, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. So if you didn't have confidence in the Buddha, you didn't have confidence in his teachings, you didn't have confidence in the community, then there's no reason why you would ever study and learn to actually get to enlightenment. But as you learn and investigate, you will gain this confidence. And even if you just had one or two of these things, you still wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. So if you had confidence in the Buddha, but you didn't have access to his teachings and you weren't part of a community, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. Or if you just had access to his teachings, but you didn't have confidence in him and you weren't part of a community, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. Or if you were part of a community where, like there's people here in Thailand that live among a community of Buddhist practitioners, but they may not have confidence in the Buddha and they may not have access to his teachings. They're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. So it's only when you have all three of these things that you can then make your way to enlightenment. So these are called the triple gem or the triple jewel. Then this fourth thing that he's talking about are virtues dear to the noble ones. What he's talking about here is the moral conduct, that in the Eightfold Path, which is the core central teaching of the Buddha that everything else plugs into, there's right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment and eliminate one of the fetters that are there, you would need to have developed your practice around right speech, right action, and right livelihood, which the 5 precepts plug into that and help you better understand in order to be able to make your way to the first stage of enlightenment. So these virtues, or this moral conduct, this virtuous behavior that's dear to the noble ones, is practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood from the Eightfold Path. And having these 4 things, then these are 4 things that you would need in addition to other things you're going to learn about that is going to help you get to that first stage of enlightenment. So let me see what questions we have. We have one here in Zoom from Christine. This is probably in reference to the intro where she says, what happens when the mind regresses? Maybe you would like to expand on that, Christine. I see you raised your hand. If you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Teacher David. I was wondering this already for a while. Basically, whenever you talk about this, that before you come to the first stage of enlightenment, the mind regresses. Mm-hmm. What exactly happens? Like you lose the concentration power that you're building up in meditation, or what regresses?
Sure. So everything in the teachings of the Buddha is guiding you to train your mind. And as you're lifting the pollution out of the mind, you're going to see the qualities of enlightenment starting to come and shine through more and more, this brightness, this radiance. And you'll see that there is more concentration, more focus, more clarity of mind, and deeper memory. And of course, by the time you get to enlightenment, that's the real height of these qualities and others that are coming into the mind. But on your way to enlightenment, you start noticing the increasing of these types of qualities. Particularly when you get into the jhanas, you're going to start noticing more calmness, more composure. You're going to notice more clarity of mind, more focus. It's still not yet to what you're going to experience in the enlightened mental state, but you're going to experience more qualities of mind than you did when you were off the path to enlightenment, or even when you first started the journey to enlightenment on the path. So as the mind moves into the jhanas, you'll start experiencing improved qualities of mind. If you become complacent, you will regress backwards. So if you don't continue to stay diligent and dedicated and determined to make your way to that first stage of enlightenment, if you get into the jhanas and arrogance starts arising, you maybe have doubt that arises, maybe you're not as diligent in your meditation practice or learning the teachings any longer, your mind can regress out of those jhanas. So even though you'll see certain qualities of mind that will be increased as you move into the jhanas, those qualities of mind will diminish as your mind is regressing. Because oftentimes when people get into the jhanas, it's like night and day compared to what you experienced when you were off the path to enlightenment, and now the mind is starting to experience some of those qualities of the jhanas. People can become somewhat arrogant and egotistical and boastful in that stage of enlightenment. In those jhanas. And some people even think that they're actually enlightened by the time they're starting to experience these jhanas because they're so significant. But they're still experiencing discontentedness. If they don't understand what enlightenment is, they can still be experiencing discontentedness and think that they're actually enlightened because they're experiencing more focus, more concentration, more calmness and composure, but they're not at the point of an arahant or an enlightened being yet. So getting into those jhanas, you see these qualities coming in, and sometimes the mind can become arrogant or boastful. You can become complacent or lacking the motivation to continue forward, and your mind can regress out of that, where now those qualities start to diminish and your mind goes back to the way it was when you were prior to getting into the jhanas.
Thank you very much. Now it's really clear. I had my hand raised for another question. Shall I ask it now, or shall we see who else has a question?
Sure, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, perfect. I have a question about eliminating the doubt. I was actually thinking about your classes on this when I was doing my last meditation retreat. It was quite, I would almost say ridiculous, because I could clearly observe that what I'm learning is actually true. I could see it for myself. I could confirm it. And then I would get up from my meditation practice, walk out of the room, and I would notice how I was thinking to myself, like, wow, maybe this is just another occupation another thing that I'm running after. What am I even doing here? Is this even true? And then I kind of caught it, and I remembered what
One moment, Christine. This is somebody just trying to crash our Zoom session. So let's see, Christine. There we go. You can go ahead and unmute there, Chris. Oh, there we go, Christine. You should be able to unmute now. I had to.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so I could see how these thoughts were arising, and I could observe how ridiculous it was that at one point I was clearly seeing that it's actually working, and at the same time I was having these thoughts. So I was wondering, do these thoughts fade away with time and practice and experience by themselves, or is there something that we actually have to do to eliminate them?
The feelings of doubt, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the way that you eliminate doubt is by continuing to investigate, continuing to learn and reflect, independently verify and practice. And the more transformation that you see to the mind and to your life where your relationships are blossoming, you're experiencing improved condition of mind, the doubt will eliminate. That you'll get to the point where you have no doubt that the progress that you've made is significant and that it's these teachings that have led you there. So the only thing you need to do is actively learn and practice the teachings, and that's what will ultimately eliminate your doubt, because you're going to see the improvement to the condition of the mind. All right, let me see what questions we might have in other parts of our class. It doesn't look like we have any questions in YouTube or Facebook, so we will go on to the next chapter, which is chapter 2. Okay. Is there someone who would like to read chapter 2? Christine, I see your hands up. Is that for chapter 2 or is that up from before?
Well, it's from before, but I'm happy to read more.
Okay, go for it. This is chapter 2 here that you're seeing. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not seeing anything.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to reshare since we had somebody come in. All right, go ahead.
Monks, a noble disciple who possesses 4 things, is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny with enlightenment as his destination. What for? Here, monks, a noble disciple possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha thus. The perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the world, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, yes. Teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the fortunate one. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teachings thus. The teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable to be personally experienced by the wise. He possesses confirmed confidence in the community thus. The community of the perfectly enlightened ones, disciples, is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. The community of the perfectly enlightened ones, disciples, is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. He possesses the virtues dear to the noble ones, unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. A noble disciple, monks, who possesses these 4 things is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So this is very similar to the last discourse, but I'm going to penetrate into some of this a little bit further. Now that you've learned what you've learned in the first chapter, let me penetrate into this a bit more. So the Buddha is saying that these are the 4 things that are going to lead to getting to stream enterer. And of course, as I mentioned, there's other things as well. But where he's saying here that a person who's entered into the first stage of enlightenment is no longer bound to the netherworld. The netherworld is those lower realms of hell, animal, and afflicted spirits. We refer to that as the netherworld. Then when he says fixed in destination, with enlightenment as his destination, that by the time somebody gets to the first stage of enlightenment, they are definitely going to get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time, either in this life or a future life. So that's why it's fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination. An individual will absolutely get to enlightenment by the time they get to that first stage of enlightenment. Then here, when the Buddha is talking about confirmed confidence in the Buddha, Here we refer to a Buddha as a perfectly enlightened one. This is because they don't have any teachers or any guides. They independently got to enlightenment with their own wisdom. And they have a certain quality of mind that an average being doesn't have, that they have the ability to remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives. And all that wisdom accumulates to the point where they're able to get to enlightenment on their own without any help of any teachers of guides in their last life. Now, there's certain beings that will get to enlightenment that can observe their past lives, but they won't have the same level of detail of memory that a perfectly enlightened one who is ultimately going to become a Buddha, their memory will be so profound. It's like they have an unlimited capacity of a hard drive. So in this life and in their previous lives, they're accumulating wisdom that ultimately leads to them being able to get to enlightenment in this last life. And now what they do in that last life is they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing teachings that help illuminate the path to enlightenment for everyone else. So they're laying down lights along the path to enlightenment so as many people as possible during their current life and then after they die can then get to enlightenment. We refer to all enlightened beings as an arahant. An arahant is the fourth stage of enlightenment who's eliminated all 10 fetters, those 10 pollutions or 10 taints, those 10 defilements. That's what an arahant is they eliminated all 10 fetters. The mind is enlightened. In those other stages, the stream enterer, they haven't yet eliminated all the fetters. Or the second stage, which is called once returner, they haven't eliminated all the fetters. Or even the third stage of a non-returner. It's not until a being gets to that fourth stage, considered an arahant, that they've now eliminated all 10 fetters and the mind is actually enlightened. So a Buddha is an arahant, and other enlightened beings are also an arahant. But the way that a Buddha gets to eliminating the 10 fetters is different than the average enlightened being. They do it on their own without any help of any teachers or guides. Where an enlightened being, they're an arahant, they've eliminated all 10 fetters, but they need teachers and guides to help them, where a perfectly enlightened one doesn't need that. And that's why we call them perfectly enlightened, because their mind isn't influenced by outside sources. All they know by the time they get to enlightenment as a Buddha is the path to enlightenment. Anything that didn't lead to their enlightenment, they discard it. For an average enlightened being, they might kind of keep certain things around just out of respect for their teacher, for example. So maybe 80 or 90% of what they know truly led to their enlightenment, but that extra 10 or 20% of baggage is still around and it didn't necessarily lead to their enlightenment. So that's why they're not considered perfectly enlightened. Only a Buddha would be perfectly enlightened because they've discarded anything that doesn't serve them to be able to get to enlightenment. Accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, because their conduct as a Buddha is going to be very refined, very well developed. One of the things that they're doing, in addition to teaching through their words and their spoken discourses, is they're modeling the teachings through their speech and their actions so that their students can learn through their conduct. And they have this true wisdom because they got to enlightenment on their own without any help of any teachers or any guides. And of course, anybody who is an actual Buddha, which is very rare, the last one that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago, that we consider them fortunate that they've actually been able to get to this enlightened mental state, because to be able to accumulate the wisdom to the point where they've been able to experience enlightenment on their own without any help of any teachers or any guides, they're very fortunate to have been able to accomplish that. And then when we say knower of the worlds, what this means is that they are aware of their existences in other realms of existence. So they're the knower of the 5 realms of existence. And the way that they know that is they accumulate wisdom over the course of multiple lives. So they're familiar with the hell realm or the animal realm or the afflicted spirits. And of course the human realm, because they're in the human realm, and even the heavenly realm. They're familiar with all 5 of these realms, and they can describe them because they're the knower of the worlds. Unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed. Essentially, what the teachings of a Buddha are doing is helping you to tame your mind. You're learning and practicing the teachings in order to uproot the pollutions and now tame the mind. Because the unenlightened mind, functioning like an animal, it's basically like a wild animal frolicking in the forest. but you can get to the point where you've tamed your mind and now you don't experience these strong emotions. Your mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So a Buddha is a unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, persons who are interested in taming their mind. They can use the teachings of a Buddha who is going to be the leader of helping others to understand how to tame their mind, because he's done it for himself with his own teachings, and now he's sharing those teachings with others to help them to be able to do that as well. We consider a Buddha a teacher of heavenly beings and humans, because in the heavenly realm and in the human realm, these beings can actually get to enlightenment. Where beings in the hell, animal, and afflicted spirits realms, they can't cultivate their mind enough to get to enlightenment, but they can move forward and get to an improved rebirth in either the human realm or the heavenly realm with opportunities to get to enlightenment, but it's just from those existences in hell, animal, or afflicted spirits that they wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment in those specific existences. But once a being is in the heavenly realm or human realm, now they have the ability to get to enlightenment. Heavenly beings oftentimes have complacency and they lack motivation to get to enlightenment because they're only experiencing pleasant feelings in that heavenly realm. You can get to enlightenment from the heavenly realm, but oftentimes those beings lack dedication and motivation, so they're reborn into other realms of existence. Human realm, this is the ideal realm because you experience all three feelings of discontentedness: pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. So there's kind of built-in motivation because we don't like those painful feelings and we're interested in getting away from the sadness or anger, frustration, guilt, and shame and fear and stress and anxiety and all these other feelings. So it is these two realms that beings are able to get to enlightenment. So we consider a Buddha a teacher of heavenly beings and humans. The goal of this path isn't to get to the heavenly realm, because as you hear, it's actually potentially danger there. Because of only experiencing pleasant feelings, you could get complacent in that existence and then be reborn into one of the other realms. So in this heavenly realm, this is the ideal existence. Now let's look at this part where we talk about confirmed confidence in the teachings. Here, the teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one. They're explained in a lot of detail because they're so deep in wisdom about the teachings, because they discovered these teachings through their own independent journey. So they have deep wisdom, where an enlightened being will know the teachings and they'll be able to share them and help people to get to enlightenment as a teacher if they choose to be a teacher. But not all enlightened beings are going to choose to be a teacher. But if someone is enlightened and they choose to teach, they'll surely be able to help people get to enlightenment. But the wisdom of a perfectly enlightened one is very deep and very penetrating and very profound, and they are well expounding the teachings. These teachings are directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. During the lifetime of the Buddha, there were multiple people who were teaching and claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. But a Buddha getting to enlightenment on their own, they know that they're a Buddha and that they got to enlightenment on their own, and they deeply know the teachings that lead to enlightenment. And they can look at other people's teachings and know that those teachings don't necessarily lead to enlightenment. So what a Buddha is doing is not teaching you to believe his teachings or have faith in his teachings or anything like that. He's guiding you to learn, to reflect, independently verifying, and then practicing those teachings. He's inviting you to come examine his teachings. He says this in other discourses because he knows with 100% certainty that he's got to enlightenment. He did it by himself, so he knows he's a Buddha, because he knows what anger and sadness and frustration and all those other discontent feelings are being experienced prior to his enlightenment. And then by the time he gets to enlightenment and he knows his mind is completely peaceful and joyful, he knows that it's his teachings that lead to that enlightened mental state. So he invites people to come and independently verify his teachings through investigating them and practicing them. And they can be applied, and you can see the results in those teachings. Then this community, As I mentioned, you're going to need to be part of a community, which we have this community that's all over the world. We have a community here in Thailand of people that come together. And by being part of the community, being around other people who are on the path to enlightenment, you can experience practicing the path to enlightenment. And this is going to directly help you to make progress on the path. Whereas if you were just off in a cave somewhere or out in the forest somewhere, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. That's what a Buddha does. A Buddha can go off on their own and get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides. But all other beings are going to need to be part of a community to be able to have support and encouragement, to be able to model your practice out of what other people are actually practicing as part of the community. And here the Buddha is explaining that his community is practicing the wholesome way, the straight way, the true way, the proper way. Because as I mentioned, during his lifetime, there were other teachers who were sharing teachings, and there were different communities that were all claiming that it was their teachings that were leading to enlightenment. And he's making it very clear that he knows that his teachings are the wholesome way, the straight way, the true way, the proper way. Sometimes you hear him refer to it as the upright community. And here he talks about the 4 pairs of persons and the 8 types of individuals. The 4 pairs of persons and 8 types of individuals are referring to anybody who's in the 4 stages of enlightenment, of stream entry, once returner, non-returner, and arahant, or individuals who are practicing to attain those stages. So someone prior to getting to the first stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer is one who's attempting to realize the stage of stream entry, but is not yet there yet. And then a stream enterer is looking to realize the once returning stage, and so forth and so on. So these are the 8 types of individuals who are in one of these 4 stages or practicing to get to one of those 4 stages. And he says these are the people that are worthy of gifts, hospitality, offerings, and reverential salutations. Because everybody in the community is going to need to be practicing generosity in order to get to enlightenment. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were many people who were practicing generosity. And if you can imagine, during the lifetime of a Buddha, there would be thousands and thousands and thousands of people learning with him and practicing his teachings. But some people aren't going to necessarily be practicing his teachings very closely out of these thousands and thousands of people. And he encouraged people to practice generosity towards individuals who are in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, or they're practicing to realize one of those 4 stages, because these are the people who are very dedicated and diligent to learning and practicing the teachings. And the more people who are in those 4 stages of enlightenment, then it's good for everybody else, because there's more wisdom in the community to be shared and for everybody to be making their way towards the enlightened mental state. So rather than just making offerings to any old person, he encouraged people to make offerings to virtuous practitioners who are deeply practicing the teachings, and specifically in one of these 4 stages of enlightenment, or practicing to realize that. And the more you understand the 4 stages of enlightenment, you'll be able to identify people who are deeply dedicated to learning and practicing these teachings and getting into one of these 4 stages of enlightenment. And you'll be able to then support those individuals with your offerings, because then by supporting those individuals, it helps that individual continue to share the teachings, continue on their journey, and then share those teachings with others to be able to then get to enlightenment as well. And then these virtues dear to the noble ones, we talked about this a bit earlier in the previous chapter, that this is referring to right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And this is what you would need to develop. And as you're developing those teachings, this is what leads to concentration. That when your mind is burdened with the pollution of craving, anger, and ignorance, and all those 10 fetters, the mind is going to be muddle-minded. It's going to lack concentration and focus. But as you're getting clarity on the teachings, and you're learning more and more closely what the wisdom of the Buddha's teachings are, and you're more easily practicing them, you're uplifting a certain amount of pollution out of your mind, which is leading to improved concentration. And that's why an individual who's gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, they'll have a certain level of concentration, but it won't be fully developed as it will be as they continue to progress and ultimately ultimately get to enlightenment. So someone who's practicing virtuous moral conduct, they'll experience more concentration. Whereas if you're actively killing or stealing or having sexual misconduct or lying or taking substances that cause heedlessness, if you're having other challenges with your moral conduct that you're just unaware of and that you're out there doing harmful things in the world, your mind's going to lack clear comprehension and concentration. But if you're practicing these teachings of right speech, right action, right livelihood, along with the others, you would have cleared up a certain amount of pollution, and now you're experiencing kind of a moderate degree of concentration as a result of having practiced those teachings. Let me see what questions you guys have on this now that we've penetrated into it a bit more deeper. You can ask those questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. All right, I'm not seeing any questions here, so we'll move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 3. Here you can see all the various things that I'm sharing as part of each one of these chapters, that it's very wise to read all of those. And you can download the books through buddhadailywisdom.com. You can take that and go print it, or you can order printed copies off of Amazon, or if you're here locally, you can get them at the temple where I teach, because reading these books either before or after class would be really helpful. All right, chapter 3. So I'm not seeing anybody volunteering, so I'll go ahead and read this. It's titled, Who is a Stream Enterer? Second Discourse. Oh, Caldon, go ahead if you'd like to read this one. You have to unmute yourself.
Don't be afraid, Mahanama. Don't be afraid, Mahanama. Your death will not be a bad one. Your demise will not be a bad one. A noble disciple who possesses 4 things, slants, slopes, and inclines towards Nibbana, enlightenment. What for? Here, Mahanama. A noble disciple possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha, thus the perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the worlds, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the fortunate one. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teachings, thus the teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable to be personally experienced by the wise. He possesses confirmed confidence in the community, thus the community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciple is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. This community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. He possesses the virtues dear to the noble ones, unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. Suppose, Mahanama, a tree was slanting, sloping, and inclining towards the east. If it was cut down as its foot, in what direction would it fall? In whatever direction it was slanting, sloping, and inclining, Venerable Sir. So too, Mahanama, a noble disciple who possesses these 4 things, slants, slopes, and inclines towards Nibbana, enlightenment.
All right, thank you, Caldon. So here, these are the same 4 things that we've been discussing throughout the class, but here the Buddha is talking to somebody who looks like they're afraid of death and perhaps even near death, and he's helping him to see, or her to see, that, okay, your practice has developed to the point where you have these 4 things, so you're slanting, sloping, and inclining towards enlightenment or nibbana. And that's what we've been talking about, is that once you get to this first stage of enlightenment, you're going to get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time. So any questions on this one? I imagine not, since it's very similar to what we've been discussing. So we'll just move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 4. Is there somebody who would like to read this one? All right, I'll go ahead and read this one. Oh, called on again. Go ahead, buddy.
A stream enterer possesses the Noble Eightfold Path. Sariputta, this is said, a stream enterer, a stream enterer. What now, Sariputta, is a stream enterer? One who possesses this Noble Eightfold Path, Venerable Sir, is called stream enterer. This Venerable One of such a name and clan. Good, good Sariputta. One who possesses this Noble Eightfold Path is a stream enterer. This Venerable One of such a name and clan.
All right, thank you, Kaldon. So here, the Buddha is actually questioning one of his students, Sariputta. This is a teaching method that a teacher might use, because as a teacher is teaching and teaching and teaching, the only way for you to understand what your students understand is to ask them questions. So the Buddha here is asking his student Sariputta, what is a stream enterer? And here's one more quality, and you're going to see multiple qualities throughout this book that a stream enterer is going to need to cultivate. And one of the ones that is being explained here is that a stream enterer will possess the Eightfold Path. They're not practicing it to perfection yet. They fully perfected right speech, right action, and right livelihood, but they still haven't perfected the mental discipline or the wisdom section of the Eightfold Path, because it's broken into 3 sections: wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. So in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, they will have perfected the Noble Eightfold Path in terms of the moral conduct, where they're practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood, but they're still working on their mental discipline and they're still working on the wisdom section. So that's what is being identified here, is that you would need to be practicing the Eightfold Path. But here, when they're saying that one would possess the Eightfold Path, what they mean is that you're understanding it. You haven't perfected it, but you understand the Eightfold Path, because that's the path to enlightenment. And you're going to see that one of the fetters that need to be eliminated in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment is what we call wrong behavior and wrong observances. What wrong behavior is that if you're doing something that's opposite of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, then you're practicing wrong behavior. That you're going to be putting out harm into the world through your speech, action, and livelihoods, is therefore harm is going to come back to you. So a stream enterer, by the time they've gotten to that first stage of enlightenment, would understand that, not as rules, not as commandments, but understanding the natural law of karma, that in practicing right speech, right action, right livelihood, you see the wisdom in it and how it's improving your relationships in your life. So you will have purified your speech, actions, and livelihood, and you'll know that that has occurred because you will see an improvement in the way that your mind thinks. You'll see more concentration. You'll see improvement into the relationships that you're involved in, and you would have deeply studied the Eightfold Path in order to understand it. That's what it means to possess the Eightfold Path, is that you understand it. But in terms of what you've implemented, it's only that moral conduct section at that point. And you would have eliminated the wrong behavior section of that particular fetter. The wrong observances part of that particular fetter is understanding that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't lead to your enlightenment. And you'll understand this as you study dependent origination, which is something we're going to study in this book next week, chapter 14. We're going to study dependent origination, which helps you to understand that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship isn't what's going to lead to your enlightenment. Among other things, that dependent origination is going to help you to understand. So let me know if you guys have questions on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 5. There's someone who would like to read this? All right, Caldon, go ahead.
Eliminating the 5 dangers and hostiles as a stream enterer. Household
Sounds like we lost you there, Caldon. Internet connection went out. I'm not sure if you're hearing me. All right, I'll pick it up from here, Caldon, and then maybe when your internet connection comes back, you'll be able to pick up from there. So the title of this chapter is Eliminating the 5 Dangers and Hostels as a Stream Enterer. Householder. When a noble disciple has eliminated 5 dangers and hostels possessing the 4 factors of stream entry, and has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom the noble method, he might, if he so aspires, declare of himself, I am one finished with hell, the animal realm, the realm of afflicted spirits, finished with the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. I am a stream enterer, no longer subject to rebirth in the lower world, fixed in destination, heading for enlightenment. What are the 5 dangers and hostels that have been eliminated? 1. Householder. One who destroys life, with the destruction of life as condition, creates danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, and danger and hostility pertaining to future lives. And he also experiences mental pain and sadness. One who abstains from the destruction of life does not create such danger and hostility pertaining to the present life, or such danger and hostility pertaining to future lives, nor does he experience pain and sadness. For one who abstains from the destruction of life, that danger and hostility has thus been eliminated. So here, the second one, he now talks about exactly the same things as it relates to taking what is not given. That if somebody takes what is not given, they're creating danger and hostility in the present life, in their future life. But one who abstains from this does not create danger and hostility in their present life or future lives. One who is doing this is going to have mental pain and sadness as a result of taking what is not given. One who abstains from this is not going to have mental pain and sadness because they've eliminated this from their practice. And then the same thing with sexual misconduct, which you can learn as part of the 5 precepts. And then the one who speaks falsely or has this false speech, one who indulges in liquor, wine, and substances that cause unawareness of mind, the basis of heedlessness. The same thing, that it creates danger and hostility in the present life and future lives, and there's mental pain and sadness. But when you abstain from these things, then you're not creating this danger and hostility in your present life and future life. So now we'll go on from here. By the way, if you guys didn't know, I'll just go ahead and teach a little bit as I'm reading. This is referring to the 5 precepts, that you would need to understand the 5 precepts and deeply be practicing them in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. That's what's helping you to flush out and understand right speech, right action, and right livelihood, that moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path. Namely, right speech and right action is where the 5 precepts plug in. So that's a whole nother teaching that you would need to deeply learn, and that's in Volume 1, Chapter 7 of the book series, and that's where I also teach that in other classes, courses, and retreats. Then we get to the next section of this. And what are the 4 factors of stream entry that he possesses? Here, these are the same 4 things that we've already been reading and studying, that you have confidence in the Buddha, confidence in the teachings, confidence in the community, and that you're practicing virtuous behavior or moral conduct. So we've already discussed these and read them in detail. But now let's look at this third thing that the Buddha is describing that a stream enterer would possess. He says, and what is the noble method that he has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom? So here, a stream enterer is going to understand this and penetrated it with wisdom, but they're not yet practicing it. Here, householder, the noble disciple reflects thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that is eliminated. So this is a very short, consolidated way to start talking about dependent origination, where it's showing causality, it's showing cause and effect or action and result. That when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. So there's some condition that's leading to the next thing. There's a cause and effect, or action and result. And then when this does not exist, that does not come to be. And with the elimination of this, that is eliminated. This is just showing causality, because the highest ultimate truth that the Buddha teaches is called dependent origination. Here we have it in a consolidated form, but in chapter 14 of this same book, we're going to study it in detail, and it's laid out very clearly. But here I'll read it to you so that you can start becoming a little bit familiar with the way it reads. He says, this is the noble method that a stream enterer would have understood and penetrated with wisdom, but they're not fully practicing it yet. And you'll understand this more next week when we study chapter 14. That is, with ignorance as condition, volitional formations, choices, decisions come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the six sense bases. With the six sense bases as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, old age and death, sorrow, grief, pain, sadness, and misery come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness. So what you guys are going to learn as part of dependent origination is the whole entire picture of why the mind experiences discontentedness and why you keep coming back and experiencing rebirth over and over. And this is independently verifiable that you can understand this and reflect on it and practice it. Because so far, if you've been studying with me, you've learned the Four Noble Truths, which gives you a certain window into what causes discontentedness. Then you learn the three poisons, or three unwholesome roots, or three fires. And you might have started already learning the 10 fetters. But it's the dependent origination that's tying all of this together and helping you see how all of this comes about. And we're going to study this in detail next week. Then once you understand that, then you will also understand, but with the remainderless fading away and elimination of ignorance comes the elimination of volitional formations, choices, decisions. With the elimination of volitional formations, elimination of consciousness. With the elimination of consciousness, elimination of name and form. With the elimination of name and form, elimination of the six sense bases. With the elimination of the six sense bases, elimination of contact. With elimination of contact, elimination of feeling. With the elimination of feeling, elimination of craving. With the elimination of craving, elimination of clinging. With the elimination of clinging, elimination of existence. With the elimination of existence, elimination of birth. With the elimination of birth, old age and death, sorrow, grief, pain, sadness, and misery is eliminated. Such is the elimination of this whole mass of discontentedness. This is the noble method that he has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom. So you will have understood this, but you won't be fully practicing it by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And this is helping set you up for elimination of the other fetters. This is part of those tools that you need to get to base camp of Mount Everest, like I was talking about, is you would need to learn and understand dependent origination. This is one of those teachings that you would need to get to the first stage of enlightenment. Householder. When a noble disciple has eliminated these 5 dangers and hostels, which are the 5 precepts, meaning you're practicing those to perfection, and he possesses these 4 factors of stream entry, which is the confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and practicing the virtuous moral conduct, and he has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom this noble method, which is dependent origination, he might, if he so aspires, declare of himself, I am one finished with hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, finished with the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. I am a stream enterer, no longer subject to rebirth in the lower world, fixed in destination, heading for enlightenment. So the Buddha is saying, if you have these three things, then this is confirmation for you that you're a stream enterer. But of course, you're going to need other things besides this. This is just one of many discourses that when you look at them in the totality, he's explaining to you what you need in order to get to that first stage of enlightenment. So here, additional information you're getting, in addition to what we've already been discussing, is practice of the 5 precepts, that you have those 4 things: confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and practice of the virtuous conduct from the Eightfold Path of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And then you thoroughly have penetrated and understand, clearly seen, dependent origination. And that's what we're going to get into next week. And then, having gotten to this first stage of enlightenment, you will no longer be reborn into the lower realms of hell, animal, or afflicted spirits. Let's see what questions you guys have on this, if any at all. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll move on to chapter 6. Anyone would like to read this one? Okay, I'll go ahead and keep reading then. This is a short one. It says, a stream enterer understands the 5 aggregates. When, monks, a noble disciple understands as they truly are the cause and the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these 5 aggregates subject to clinging, monks, then he is called a noble disciple who is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destination, with enlightenment as his destination. So here, what he's explaining is that an individual is going to understand the 5 aggregates. They're going to understand the disappearance, the cause, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in regards to these 5 aggregates. So let me explain to you what the 5 aggregates are, and let me explain to you the cause, disappearance, gratification, the danger, and the escape. So the 5 aggregates is what's going to help you understand what a living being is. And this is what's going to help you to practice that first precept of not killing any living beings and living compassionately. And there's certain situations, as we've talked in other courses, where to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, you might have to do things like eradicate bed bugs or termites or things like this. But you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So you need to know what is a living being. And you can learn this, and then you can independently reflect on it to verify it, starting with this being who you are now, because you have all 5 of these aggregates. The first one is that there's physical form. There's a certain physical body. Then there's feelings. These feelings are results of experiences in the mind through the 6 sense bases. You're going to have certain contact through the 6 sense bases, and then it's going to produce either pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant feelings. So you're going to have feelings as a living being. Then there's going to be certain perceptions. This is a belief or opinion about how things seem in the world. So you're going to look out at the world and you have certain beliefs and opinions. And some of those are going to be misperceptions or false beliefs. But nonetheless, as a living being, you're going to have a certain perception about the world around you. Then you're going to have volitional formations, which are choices or decisions. You're going to be able to make choices and decisions related to various things that are going on in your life. This is one of the aggregates or one of the collections or one of the elements of what makes a living being a living being. Then there's a consciousness, which is the mind itself. So you can see that you have physical form, you have feelings, you have perceptions, you have volitional formations, and you have consciousness. But you can also see that animals have those as well. So they are living beings. But then you can see the electronic device that you're listening to this or you're watching this on. It doesn't have the 5 aggregates. It has physical form, but it doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have perceptions. It doesn't have volitional formations or choices and decisions. It doesn't have a consciousness. So there you know that this computer or a tablet or a phone, whatever electronic device you're using, it's not a living being. You should still take care of it, right? Because it provides you certain things, but it's not a living being. So if you drop it and destroy it, you haven't killed a living being. So you need to know these 5 aggregates of form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. That's part of getting to the first stage of enlightenment, is understanding these 5 aggregates. Then you would need to understand the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape. Because one of the things that can happen is you can be craving and clinging and holding on, attached to these 5 aggregates, where you have a certain physical form, and now when you see a wrinkle or a gray hair, or you see a little bit of fat, or you start losing your hair, you can have discontentedness if you're clinging to the form aggregate. Or if you are clinging to the feeling aggregate, if you're clinging to those pleasant feelings and you want to hold on to those pleasant feelings, now you're going to experience painful feelings. Or if you're clinging to your perceptions, certain beliefs or opinions that you have about the world, you're going to need to, with wisdom, choose to let go, because there are certain things that you have false beliefs and misperceptions about the world. That's part of why the mind's in the unenlightened state. It's one of the main reasons why it's in the unenlightened state, because the unenlightened mind has certain false beliefs and certain misperceptions about the world. So you're going to need to learn how to not cling to your perceptions, that you're always seeking the truth through investigating what's going on around you. Then, if you're clinging to your volitional formations, which are your choices and decisions, you can also experience discontentedness. If you're planning to take a trip to Australia and you're 6 months away from that, and you've booked the plane tickets, the hotel, and all the various things, and then as you get closer and closer to your trip, boom, COVID happens and no planes are moving anywhere and nobody can go. If you're clinging to your choices and decisions, you're going to be discontent when that is experienced, because you're clinging and holding on to your choice and decision. And same thing if you're holding on to the mind, wanting this to be permanent. So knowing what these 5 aggregates are, and that you have all 5 of these, and that the unenlightened mind is going to have a tendency to cling to them, and you're not interested in clinging to them, you're interested in letting go. Now you can actually do that when you understand what the 5 aggregates are, and you start working on eliminating your clinging through things like breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. So here, understanding the cause of what's causing all of this is craving, desire, attachment. The reason why you have come into the world is because of craving. Craving is the fuel that leads to constant rebirth. It leads to discontentedness in the mind. That's what the cause of discontentedness is, but it also is what leads to rebirth. So that's the cause of taking up these 5 aggregates. The disappearance of these is to understand the universal truth of impermanence, that these 5 aggregates are not permanent. And if you understand that, then the mind has less interest in clinging to any of these 5 aggregates, that they're not going to stay permanently the same. So why would you cling to them? They're going to be constantly changing. But because of the mind's central desire, there's this gratification that the mind wants. It has this fetter or taint or pollution of central desire, where the mind is longing, yearning, wanting to hold on to these 5 aggregates. And this is the danger. It leads to the danger that if you allow the mind to get this gratification with its central desire and experience these conditioned pleasant feelings, then the danger is that it's going to be experiencing this discontentedness, which is the universal truth of discontentedness. Then the escape from all of this is the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the complete perfect plan that the Buddha shares, that if you learn it and practice it, it will lead to the escape of the danger, which is discontentedness. All right, so let me see if you guys have any questions on the 5 aggregates, or the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, or escape. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so we'll move to the next chapter, which is chapter 7. Here, this one is titled, A Stream Enter Understands the 6 Sense Bases. Monks, there are these 6 sense bases. What 6? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. When, monks, a noble disciple understands as they really are the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these 6 sense bases, he is called a noble disciple who is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the nether world, fixed in destination, with nibbana or enlightenment as his destination. So here he's explaining that in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would need to understand the 6 sense bases. So let me help you understand them, as well as the gratification, danger, and escape. We refer generally to the 6 sense bases as the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. This is the doorways that discontentedness is coming in through. So if you have central desire in your mind, which every unenlightened being has, then the mind is longing and yearning through these sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. Now, if you have contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind, and it's agreeable to you due to your cravings, then you'll experience conditioned pleasant feelings. But if it's disagreeable to you, you will experience conditioned painful feelings. So the internal sense base, we refer to these generally as the 6 sense bases, but more specifically, we refer to these as the internal sense base, which is the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Then there's something called the external sense base. The external sense base is what the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind is coming into contact with. So the eyes are seeing a form. The form is the external sense base. The ear is hearing a sound. The sound is the external sense base. The nose is smelling an odor. The odor is the external sense base. The tongue is tasting a flavor. This is the external sense base. The body is coming in contact with a physical object. The physical object is the external sense base. And then the mind is recognizing certain mental objects, which the mental object is the external sense base. So the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind is coming in contact with forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects. And the mind has this longing and yearning because of its craving to see permanently agreeable forms through the eyes, and hear permanently agreeable sounds through the ear, and smell permanently agreeable odors through the nose, and permanently taste agreeable flavors through the tongue, and experience permanently agreeable physical objects touching the body. And it aspires and has this desire, this longing, this yearning for permanently agreeable mental objects to be experienced through the mind. But because of impermanence, it's not possible for you to experience permanently agreeable contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So you're sometimes, because of craving, going to experience disagreeable contact. So you'll hear disagreeable music or disagreeable sounds, or you'll smell disagreeable odors. But if you understand that it's impermanent and that it's not going to, it doesn't need to cause discontentedness in the mind, then you can understand this gratification, danger, and escape, which is the same exact thing that I described up here, where the cause and disappearance you're understanding. And now what the Buddha is guiding you to for the 6 sense bases is to understand gratification, danger, and escape. The gratification is that the mind is longing and yearning with central desire through these 6 sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. But because of impermanence, you can't get that. So because of this desire for gratification, for permanently agreeable contact, there's this danger that you're going to experience discontentedness, which is conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. The escape of that is the Eightfold Path. That's the complete perfect plan that is explaining to you the wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline to train the mind and escape and eradicate and eliminate the central desire so that your mind's no longer longing and yearning through these 6 sense bases for gratification. Therefore, you won't experience the danger because you've escaped the cycle of rebirth and you've escaped this discontentedness by eliminating cravings, desires, attachments, and dismantling all the pollutions that are in the mind that are causing it. So this is understanding the six sense spaces as a stream enterer, that you would understand this. You haven't eliminated central desire yet as a stream enterer, but you understand this process. You understand the internal sense bases, the external sense bases. You understand the gratification, the danger, the escape, and you independently verify this. Not only the 5 aggregates that we talked about, you can independently verify those with this physical body and all that you are as a living being and other living beings, but you can also independently verify the 6 sense bases, that anytime your mind is discontent, you will see that it was something that came through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. And you were either longing for agreeable contact and you got it, and you got pleasant feelings, which are conditioned feelings, which are discontent, or you've experienced disagreeable contact due to your cravings, and it came through one of these doorways: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. So now we'll move to chapter 8. Adon, anytime you would like to read, you're welcome to let me know. If I don't see your hand, I'll just keep going. So it looks like you're raising your hand, so go ahead. You're welcome to read this one.
Two kinds of stream entering. A confident stream entry. Monks, the eye is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The ear is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The nose is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The tongue is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The body is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The mind is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. One who places confidence in these teachings and persistent in them, thus is called a confident stream entry. One who has entered the fixed course of rightness, entered the plane of wholesome persons, transcended the plane of the worldlings. He is incapable of doing any deed by reason of which he might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the realm of afflicted spirits. He is incapable of passing away without having realized the fruit of stream entry. A teaching stream entry. One for whom these teachings are understood thus after being pondered to a sufficient degree with wisdom is called a teaching stream entry. One who has entered the fixed course of rightness, entered the plane of wholesome persons, transcended the plane of the worldlings. He is incapable of doing any deed by reason of which he might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the realm of afflicted spirits. He is incapable of passing away without having realized the fruit of stream entry.
All right, thank you, Caldon. So let me help you guys understand this. There's the first stage of enlightenment, which is called stream entry. And then the Buddha has these 2 different types of stream enterers. But in order to get to stream entry, you would like to cultivate all of these qualities. So here he's describing a confident stream enterer. And this is one who understands the universal truth of impermanence, that you understand the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind are all impermanent. And this helps you to be able to reduce and eliminate central desire, because you understand anything that you come in contact with through the 6 sense bases, it's impermanent. So why try to cling to it or hold on to it? But of course, your mind's going to keep wanting to do that as long as it's untrained. So that's why you've got that breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity there to train the mind to let go. But you need the wisdom to understand that this is the case. And as you independently verify that and you see the truth for yourself that all these things are impermanent, with all these other factors that the Buddha is teaching in this particular book, you understand and have confidence in these teachings, and you continue to persist in learning and developing your mind around these teachings. And the Buddha describes this as a confident stream enterer. And then, having attained the stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer, you would be incapable of making any decision that's going to lead to rebirth into hell, the animal realm, or afflicted spirits, because you've learned the teachings to a certain degree and you've independently verified them, and you've cultivated a certain amount of wisdom, that you absolutely wouldn't do anything that is going to lead to rebirth in these lower realms. Namely, you're practicing the moral conduct of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And you've seen the truth in that. You haven't believed the teachings. You're not following them as rules or commandments or anything like that. But you've penetrated into the true teachings, and you can independently verify for yourself that, yeah, when you stole in the past, you were worried about that. You had fear about that as a child, as we steal and we take things without asking, that our mind was discontent, and that when we experienced causing harm to others through stealing, harm came back to us. Or if we had sexual misconduct at any point during our life and we caused harm through our sexual conduct, we saw the harm coming back to us. And all these other aspects of the teachings too, things like speaking harshly, that if you've learned right speech, you understand that you're speaking the truth, that you're not going to slander, that you're not speaking harsh, and you're not having frivolous speech. And you've dissected that, and you've seen in situations where you have done that in the past that it's led to unwholesome results based on your unwise decisions. But now by the time you get to this confident stream entry, and also as a teaching stream enter, you're incapable of now doing those things. You're incapable of lying. You're incapable of slandering. You're incapable of speaking harshly. You're incapable of having frivolous speech, because you've refined your practice to a point where you're no longer practicing in that way. That's what he's talking about here. Ultimately, you would like to build your confidence and independently confirm the teachings to develop wisdom and enter into this first stage of enlightenment, so there you can go beyond as well. I'm going to see if you guys have questions here. Not seeing any questions. So I will keep going into the next chapter, which is chapter 9. All right, this one is titled Fruit of Stream Entry. One who knows and sees these teachings as described in two kinds of stream entering, thus is called a stream enterer, no longer bound to the nether world, fixed in destination, with enlightenment as his destination. Sariputta, this noble eightfold path is the stream, that is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. So this is describing what I just described earlier, is that you would like to cultivate both of those, where you have confidence, having understood that all the six sense bases are impermanent, and you would have liked to ponder or reflect on the teachings to a sufficient degree that you have cultivated a certain amount of wisdom to be able to have gotten to the first stage of enlightenment. And having done that, you will then experience the benefit or the fruit, which is an improved condition of mind, improved condition of life, and that now you're fixed in destiny with enlightenment as your destination. And it's the Eightfold Path that is going to guide you to accomplishing that. So that's one of those foundational teachings that you would like to deeply understand and then practice to be able to help you get to this first stage of enlightenment. I will check if there's any questions. You guys have been pretty quiet today. Not too many questions. All right, so we'll go to the last chapter, which is chapter 10. Here, this one is titled, The Stream Enterer Fulfills... Oh, go ahead, Khaldun, you can read this one.
The stream enterer fulfills virtuous behavior but cultivates concentration and wisdom only to a moderate extent. Monks, every half month, more than 150 training guidelines come up for recitation. Clansmen who aspire for their own good training list. These are all comprised within these three trainings. What three? The training in the higher virtuous behavior, moral conduct, the training in the higher mind, mental discipline, and the training in the higher wisdom. These are the three trainings in which all this is comprised. Here, monks, A monk fulfills virtuous behavior, moral conduct, but cultivates concentration and wisdom only to a moderate extent. He falls into wrongdoing in regard to the lesser and minor training guidelines and rehabilitates himself. For what reason? Because I have not said that he is incapable of this, but in regard to those training guidelines that are fundamental to the spiritual life. In practicing with the spiritual life, his behavior is constant and steadfast. Having undertaken the training guidelines, he trains in them. With the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a stream enterer, no longer subject to rebirth in the lower world, fixed in destiny with enlightenment as his destination.
All right, thank you, Kaldon. So here, the Buddha is describing that a stream enterer has fully developed the moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path, or virtuous behavior, but they've only cultivated concentration and wisdom to a moderate extent, meaning that they haven't fully developed their mind with concentration and wisdom yet. And they're in the process of doing that. They're a stream enterer. They're not yet a fully perfectly enlightened, they're not yet a enlightened being as an arahant yet. Here at the beginning, he's talking about these training guidelines that come up for recitation. This is where every 2 weeks he gathered together his students and they came together and they recited his teachings word for word and chanting. That's how they remembered them and commit them to memory. This is where you can understand that the Buddha never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship, and chanting doesn't have any mystical or magical powers. The Buddha used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. So every 2 weeks that he would have the students reciting his teachings, and here he's explaining that aspect of it here, and this is helping them to remember the teachings. They're remembering and learning the Eightfold Path. This is the short way of referring to the Eightfold Path: the virtuous behavior, the higher mind, and the higher wisdom. There's those three sections: the wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. And having developed the moral conduct as a stream enterer, but not yet fully developed the mental discipline, which is the concentration, and not yet fully developed their wisdom, they may end up on their way to have these challenges with their moral conduct. As a stream enterer, you wouldn't be doing any moral conduct that is opposite of the Eightfold Path, but there's other moral conduct that's deeper than the Eightfold Path. So a stream enterer is going to be practicing the moral conduct to the level of the Eightfold Path, which is a certain level of detail. But a stream enterer still has in their mind, they still have sensual desire. They still have ill will. They still have conceit, which is that arrogance and pride and boastfulness. So their moral conduct isn't fully perfected yet, but they're at least practicing to the level of detail that's in the Eightfold Path. But as they have difficulties with their moral conduct, they have at least enough wisdom at that first stage of enlightenment that as they have difficulties, they can rehabilitate themselves, or they can see where they're having difficulties and challenges, and now they can improve upon that. And the Buddha is saying that they would have enough wisdom to be able to accomplish that. They haven't fully cultivated their concentration and wisdom, but they have enough wisdom that as they have difficulties and challenges or make mistakes, they would know that they would understand the wrongdoing and then be able to improve upon that to make it better for the future. And the Buddha is coming down here and saying that they would have this development of the training guidelines, which are the teachings that are fundamental to the spiritual life. And they would have undertaken those, but they then would have developed to the point where they've eliminated the first 3 fetters. Out of the 10 fetters, a stream enterer would have eliminated the first 3. This is one of the major and primary things that you look to see if you've entered into the first stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer, that you would have eliminated the first 3 fetters. The first 3 fetters are personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. And I teach these at other classes and courses and retreats. I have videos and books and things where I've discussed these in detail about what they are, how to eliminate them, and how to know when you've actually eliminated them. And in this retreat coming up here in Thailand in August, I'm going to be building up students throughout the entire retreat to have all the teachings that they need. And then we're going to be spending an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours on each one of these fetters. There's going to be one class on personal existence view to be sure you understand what it is, how to eliminate it, and how to know once you've eliminated it. Same thing with doubt and wrong behavior and observances. So if you need this information, there's resources that I have if you're not coming to the retreat that you can get this information. You can look at the books, the audio books, the online classes, the videos. You can reach out to me through personal guidance. You can ask questions in classes. You can ask questions in the Facebook group, and I'll be sure that you understand what each one of these fetters are, how to eliminate them, and then how to know that you've actually eliminated them. Because you wouldn't be able to eliminate these first 3 fetters and get to the first stage of enlightenment if you didn't know what they were, how to eliminate them, and know that you've actually eliminated them. So feel free to digest that content at any point, because remember, you're on an independent journey and you're going to need to approach these 3 fetters understanding them and how to eliminate them. So let me see what questions you guys have on this chapter. This is the last one for today's class. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions related to today's class, so I'll just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining and reminding you that next week on Saturday, we're going to be moving to the next 10 chapters. So chapters 11 through 20. We'll be sharing those teachings in the class and coming together to learn them and study them. So if you've learned chapters 11 through 20 prior to class, or you learned them through the book after the class, not only will you learn the words of the Buddha, have the reference to go back to the original source teachings, but you'll also have those reflections that I share as part of the books as well that will help you further gain insight into what the Buddha is teaching. And then the class kind of helps you to pull all that together and get clarity and ask any questions that you have related to what you've learned in the book. So the next class is next Saturday at the same time. You can join here online, or you can join at the temple in Chiang Mai at 9 a.m. in the morning. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 19 of volume 1, which is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. This is where you're going to learn a bit of the life story of Gotama Buddha in his life, as well as sickness, aging, and death, because these are 3 significantly challenging aspects of human life and human existence. And these are ultimately what helped motivate the Buddha to go off on this journey to enlightenment, but they tend to be very challenging for people to deal with in the human existence. So not only are we going to be talking about the life story of the Buddha and what motivated him and what he accomplished during his life, but we're going to be talking about these 3 aspects of life to be able to help you with teachings that will allow you to be more peaceful and more joyful during times of sickness, aging, and death. So if you'd like to join for that, you're welcome to join at the same time tomorrow, which is 9 p.m. Thai time here online. And then I also teach this at the temple here at 9 a.m. And then this Wednesday, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation together on Wednesday at 9 p.m. You're welcome to join. That's Thai time, so whatever time that is in your time zone. And whenever you're not able to make these live classes, you're welcome to learn through the replay. It's recorded in Facebook, YouTube, and on our podcast as well. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to those of you that have read the chapters. I really appreciate your time, effort, and dedication to learning these teachings and practicing them. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.